If you see this guy holding two triangles, he claims that's mana. And the mana being what was put in the Ark of the Covenant, and that the Egyptians actually had Arks of the Covenant. So you can see these paintings, which I almost miss, up in this corner of the Roman times, were completely different. You see hieroglyphics and you see that, you're like, wow, that should be in like an Italian church or something. And Mat, meaning mother, and their son, Kanchu. Interesting, the father, the mother, and the son. Ring any bells? Joseph, Mother Mary, and Jesus. There's actually a cartoon from Walt Disney with Donald Duck learning about mathematics. It's really interesting, look it up. He has a symbol, the pentagram on the hand, with most people think it's devil worshiping, but it's actually a very interesting mathematical diagram, mathematical symbol. And he believed that the ratio was kind of the sacred geometry of how humans are built. In 1937, French mathematician, philosopher, and more importantly, Egyptologist, R.A. Schwaller studied this temple behind me, the Luxor Temple. Also, he termed the phrase the Temple of Man. Let's find out why. Schwaller spent 15 years here studying every stone, measuring everything, analyzing everything, literally every stone. Through his research, Schwaller found that the dynastic Egyptians, which would come down to build the Temple of Luxor, that's around 3,500 BC, that they actually had advances of math comparing to the Pythagorean Greeks about 1,500 years later. So they were way more advanced than the Greeks, and they're in the past. So why is this a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because the kind of entitled, some would say, European Enlightenment period has made us think of that we're constantly advancing, that our civilization is in fact the most advanced civilization. But Schwaller's work kind of shows that, well, mathematically, the Egyptians were probably far more advanced than the Greeks after them, and possibly us. So why is it that we always want to think we're the best? Is it ego? Is it that we have iPhones? Is there some other type of intelligence that maybe we don't think about? Some type of intelligence that is far more advanced, but since it's not Wi-Fi or something fancy gadget, or right, because it's not some fancy piece of technology, that we kind of put down the primitive people. Maybe they have more power spiritually. Maybe they're more connected to God. Maybe because they didn't have a lot of technology, they were uplifted more. Now, don't get me wrong, ancient civilizations had death, murder, war, famine, everything else we have in the world today. Just maybe they connected spirituality, religion, mathematics, philosophy, enlightenment, science, astrology, all into one. And this was kind of the basis for Schwaller's work. Egyptians, more advanced in mathematics than Pythagoras. For all of you that don't forget from your schooling, Pythagoras theorem, ring a bell? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You know, there's obviously existed before Pythagoras, but Pythagoras kind of created a cult school of mathematics, very secretive. We still don't know a lot today, but I've read, I don't know how historically accurate this is, that he actually ended up coming to Egypt for about 20 years in his later life, and then going back to Greece and starting the school of Pythagoras. Funny note about that is there's actually a cartoon from Walt Disney with Donald Duck learning about mathematics. It's really interesting, look it up. He has a symbol, the pentagram on the hand, with most people think it's devil worshiping, but it's actually a very interesting mathematical diagram, mathematical symbol.
Of a fringe idea I've recently come across is a guy by the name of Tim Hogan, who does a lot of research on the Knights Templar. He's on Gaia, so you know Gaia, there's some good stuff on there, but there's a lot of crazy stuff, ancient alien stuff, right? So I like those things sometimes just for entertainment, but also to, you know, make sure I keep the my mind open. But one thing he says, you know, is if you see this guy holding two triangles, he claims that's mana. And the mana being what was put in the Ark of the Covenant, and that the Egyptians actually had Arks of the Covenant, and they would put the mana in. And basically what mana is through alchemy, through chemistry, basically, you dissolve a substance, like let's just say a plant or a leaf or some type of substance, into ash, and then you burn that ash forever. And then there's also some stuff you could add to it, I don't really know, but basically you come to this white powder, grayish white powder, and that is like the substance in the purest form. You dig it down all the way to its level. And apparently that in the Ark of the Covenant, I don't know if it's the gold combination of the box, would actually create some type of electricity or power system. I don't know about Tim Hogan. I'm interested in him. I like his ideas, but I also heard that these are offerings. It could be alcohol, food, stuff like that. But it is kind of interesting, these two triangles. He's saying they're mounds of mana. So take it for what it's worth. Whether you believe it or not, it is entertaining. So you commonly see the two crowns of the kings. One, I'm gonna mess this up, the Hedjet and the Deshet. So Hedjet being kind of like a bowling pin that you would hit when you go bowling. It's basically white. That was the crown of Upper Egypt, which Upper Egypt is actually south and Lower Egypt actually north. So it goes based off how the Nile is flowing, not north to south. So people get confused on that. But the other crown, the crown of Lower Egypt, was red and kind of had like a back to it. And when you see them combined, the crowns combined, that represents that the Lower and Upper Egypt were unified, which is a very important part of Egypt's history. King Menes united the upper and lower parts of Egypt, and that's where he wore the crown. And he kind of became the first king of Egypt, although there's kings before him, but we kind of assume, since we have the most history on him, that he's kind of the first king that we kind of give attention to, I would say. So Schwaller was saying that 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians were combining philosophy, religion, art, and science into the synthesized kind of system. So it wasn't just about, it was like polymath, like Imhotep. It's kind of like, you know, following multiple studies as opposed to nowadays where we follow one study. They would kind of combine them all to be godlike. So combining all these kind of studies, science, art, philosophy, religion, it wasn't all separated like we have it today. That's what Schwaller was getting at, which kind of reminds me of alchemy a bit. So I believe knowing all these different, being a polymath, knowing all these different studies kind of helps you unite the brain as opposed to just focus on one part of the brain. And the reason it reminds me of alchemy is because alchemy, or chemistry, you know, if you don't know what alchemy is, it was basically trying to take base metals and turn them into gold. So they were doing chemistry, basically. Alchemy was pre-chemistry, and they were trying to, you know, kings would pay tons of money to have these people trying to figure out if they could only turn lead into gold, right? Well, there's kind of a rumor that one part of the step, there's a long process of the step of creating lead into gold, or any base metal into gold, some say, you know, whatever it is. One step was that you had to be a good person. God would kind of help the process if you're a good person. So basically taking base metals, a lower metal, and turning it into upper metal, gold, and taking your lower self and creating it into upper self. So some even say that the base metal to gold thing is, you know, an allegory, that it's actually talking about us. People are stuck in the material world, but the gold's really inside you. You got to access it. We're base metals, we're lower people. We got to build ourselves to higher people through the study of different sciences, the study of being a better human, the study of astronomy, who knows? Could be anything. These columns behind me, I don't know if you see, behind and above me are giant. They're so freaking huge. Look at that. Again, like just the magnitude of things. I've been around the world, I've been to Rome, I've seen a lot of stuff that's impressive, but to see these huge structures that predated all that is just absolutely crazy. Schwaller's work kind of got represented, you know, in the last 20 years by the book Serpent in the Sky by John Anthony West. I haven't actually read the book, it's on the list, but he did make a great documentary. I watched a 2-part documentary called Magical Egypt. Kind of explains some of this, kind of gives you kind of the gist. By the way, I'll put the link below to John Anthony West's book, The Serpent in the Sky. Also, anything I can find on Schwaller, I'll link that down there as well. Just so you can kind of, you know, if you want to dive deeper into this, because I'm just, you know, I haven't dived deep myself. So feel free to click those links and check them out, because I think it'll be really interesting. Schwaller believed that the Luxor Temple, which he called the Temple of Man, was measured out, because he was really into measurements and he was a mathematician. So that was his main focus, measuring every stone, figuring out why certain things weren't aligned, why some things, you know, were off a bit. And he believed that the ratio was kind of the sacred geometry of how humans are built. So if you lay a skeleton, you know, bird's eye view skeleton on top of the temple, you would get kind of the same outlay. You know, I can't stop thinking about King Solomon's temple in Egypt. It keeps popping in my head. You know, especially with the Temple of Man theory, where you lay, you know, the skeleton on top of the temple and it matches pretty well. Kind of the Holies of Holies. Think of the body, you know, you enter in from the feet, goes up from the heart into the eyes. And that's the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was held. And this temple kind of lays out that way. And that is, you know, where the Ark of the Covenant exists, or where God exists, where only priests could go, only the holy or clean could go. This temple, same thing. Only the Holies of Holies, or what we call the chapel in the back, the first structure that was built, is basically only the priests were allowed in there. King Solomon's temple, only the priests were allowed in the Holies of Holies, the third section, just like the Temple of Luxor. A lot of similarities there. I even kind of think, you know, the pyramids are older than this structure, that maybe the pyramid was the grand temple and then they started building these for whatever reason. So maybe the pyramid was, you know, kind of the temple for a while, and somehow they created something more horizontal and flat, like the Luxor Temple. By the way, I'm getting a lot of my information from an interesting blog that kind of goes over all these kind of fringe ideas. And it's Martin Gray's blog called World Pilgrim Guide. There's a lot of information on there, and I'm taking a lot of information on there for this video. So I'll put the links down there as well to his blog, so you can check him out. Want to give him credit. So, side note, I always feel like I go to parts of the temple to record these videos, or sites I'm at, whether it's Turkey or Egypt or Thailand, and I go to kind of secluded areas because they're usually crowded and loud and people are in the way and I can't focus, and maybe I'm a little shy as well. You might not know that, but it seems like if you do that, people look at you, certain tourists look at you from a certain huge country that might be communist, and they, when you're over there, like, oh, he must be looking at something amazing, we should go over there too. So I've noticed that in museums and in temples, that if I'm looking at something no one cares about, all of a sudden people are like, oh, well, he cares, it must be interesting. It's not. Also, once again, can I please mention that if you're checking out these sites and there's ladies in pretty dress taking pictures and you try to get out of their way, just go through, because they're not going to care about your time and they'll take 1,000 pictures over and over and over. So I try to give them 1 or 2 and then I push through. I must be getting old and jaded.
Been traveling since I was about 24. So I'm 38 now, so a long time. Ooh, by the way, you can check out, side note, welcome to my brain, side note, you can check out that, you can still see some of the paint. That's crazy. This is like, you know, 1500 BC, this temple. I think it was like 1400 BC when it was first built. Although some archaeological sites near here say, you know, up to 3000 years BC. But yeah, you can still see some of the paint. It just blows my mind. Just shows the desert really does preserve. And just to kind of go off that, another side note is that the desert does preserve, and the ancients kind of saw that too. Although the Nile River was here, and with the flooding, it was probably a lot less desert than it is now. But they saw that when animals died, that the desert kind of preserved them. And they found out that liquids in the body kind of help rush the decay of the body. So that's why they mummified bodies, mummified their pharaohs. They took out the brain, the organs, and kind of put them in jars next to them. They left the heart, because you need the heart for when you're in the Day of Judgment, the Egyptian Book of Dead. If you guys have seen that famous picture here, your heart will be weighed against the feather of justice. And if the heart outweighs the feather of justice, then you get eaten by a crocodile god that's sitting right there. If your heart is lighter than the feather of justice, then, well, you get to go to Egyptian heaven. By the way, the rules in the Egyptian Book of Dead, like, I have never met anybody, oh, can hear the Muslim call for prayer. It's Ramadan right now in Egypt, so you're gonna hear that every once in a while, but yeah, no one could pass the rules from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, at least today. I've never met anyone. It's like, if you ever made a joke at someone's expense, something like that. It's like so many rules. Yeah, we should do a video on that. Now we entered into the most sacred spot of this temple, the chapel. The Holy of Holies, perhaps? Only the priests were allowed in here, so let my corrupt butt come in. So beyond this point is the Holy of Holies. If you lay the skeleton down for the Temple of Man, this will be around here. This section I'm in right now is more horizontal. That's the eyes. They come in here, it goes up. Only priests were allowed in here, so my degenerate ass is gonna do its best to not get struck by lightning or whatever. There's some penis action right here. Oh, right there. Impressive. That's small, right? So these inscriptions are interesting because it's basically like a book. It's basically, you know, chapters of a book put all throughout the temple, a book that will last forever. So, you know, it's a lot of like, you see a lot of presenting of gifts. See the Ankh a lot, which is, you know, basically life, the symbol for life. Also a cross that, actually at the Coptic Museum, you'll see that they were even using the Ankh as their cross, and then now we use a cross. So obviously religion, in my opinion, you know, I grew up Christian, a lot of my family probably hates hearing this, but a lot of like religious aspects have been taken from culture, from culture, from culture. It's always adapted to whoever's in charge. Over thousands of years, it keeps changing. So even look at root words, you know, find a word and find the root for it. Like Amen. Amenhotep was the one who originally built this place I'm standing now. By the way, Luxor today, obviously it's called the Temple of Luxor because we're in Luxor, was actually known in ancient times as Thebes. It was constructed 1400 BCE. The knowledge obviously came way before that because they had to have the knowledge to be able to build this place. It was known as the Southern Sanctuary. It's also next to the other temple, across from the other temple that we'll go to in the next video, called Karnak. So they took the Chapel of Mut, which means mother, and then the Romans came in and created a church. Mother Mary, anybody? This reminds me of when I visited Ephesus. You see the video here, or here, I don't know. But in Ephesus, they had the goddess of Artemis, who was then later replaced by the Christian Mother Mary. So you see that a lot, these kind of transformations of the female or the masculine. And wait till we get to Karnak in the next video because there's more of that with a little bit of astrology. By the way, a kind of boring thing that was invented in Egypt was, well, Sumer had it before them too, I believe, was the inventory system. They went all through the kingdom and tracked the inventory of population, cows, treasure, all this stuff. It might not seem that interesting, but it's pretty sophisticated because that's what we do today, our census. But that's good because when the kings died, they had a, you know, inventory to make sure things weren't stolen or missing. So kind of boring, but obviously it's also very intelligent. Imhotep III built the, also Tutankhamun, known as King Tut, Ramses II, even the Alexander the Great Greeks / Egyptians did some renovations on this temple. So the Romans had this place from 29 BC to like 640 something AD. And, you know, I talked about they converted to a church, but they also, you know, they worship the Egyptian god Amun. You remember, there's Egyptians here too, and the Greeks, Cleopatra was Greek, you know, but she was also Egyptian. Greek heritage, but Egyptian where she lives. And so the god Amun was worshipped here. So when the Romans came about 300, they kind of, the emperor was in a cult of the god of Jupiter. So you can see these paintings, which I almost missed up in this corner, of the Roman times were completely different. You see hieroglyphics and you see that, you're like, wow, that should be in like an Italian church or something. Roman columns, Corinthian style, and Egyptian columns. Go Egypt. The Egyptian columns are just way more massive. Roman columns are nice, don't get me wrong, it's not about size, ladies. The Romans also put John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke for the 4 Gospels. Frescoes right there above going into the chapel. They had the annual Opet festival here, which would bring something from Karnak over here. By the way, we're along the Nile. I'll just read this. The festival was held here honoring the father Amun and Mat, meaning mother, and their son Khonsu. I don't know, Khonsu or A. Interesting, the father, the mother, and the son. Ring any bells? Joseph, Mother Mary, and Jesus. These columns are so massive. It's insane.
especially see them compared to the Roman columns. And now you see a mosque. Just keeps going and going and going. So the entrance to the Luxor Temple had these two obelisks. You only see one. There was this one and then a shorter one. This one was the taller one. And then the shorter one, but from this view, well, first off, the shorter one's in Paris now. They took it, so sorry, Egypt. When you walked up to it, it looked like the same size because one of them was closer to the wall. So from a distance, the obelisks looked like the same size, but if you're actually under them, you'd see one was shorter. So they were using this illusion effect in this temple. So I think when you walked in, there was this kind of like mysterious, magical kind of messing with your brain as you go in there, and that's just at the gate. So a lot of like little tricks that way. Well, I think that's it for the Temple of Luxor, the Temple of Man. Now let's head to Karnak in the next video. Thank you for joining me and hearing me babble and babble and babble, but yeah, Luxor, worth it. First temple I've been to here, definitely worth it.